Aston Villa 2, Chelsea 1. Tactical breakdown. But you have to understand this. This is not on Maresca. So let me explain how after such a promising start to this match, this meant that we came away with nothing. And tell me if you spotted it too. Let's dive into it. So lineups wise, I was genuinely impressed with it. Because we saw something different and we saw Maresca adapting to his squad's perhaps shortfalls of recent times. In the injury department and the overall just ability. And the inclusion of both our right backs, Reece James and Malo Gusto, made you think possibly this could be a back five. But actually, James was employed more of a midfielder in what looked to be more like a 4-3-3. However, Enzo was able to play slightly higher in that more attacking 10 position, with Caicedo and James sitting slightly deeper. The main thing is, it was very fluid. Neto was playing as a striker and Nkunku and Palmer were deployed on the wings. But in reality, this structure wasn't fixed at all. Now, on the ball in that deep build-up phase, we had Caicedo and Reece James as the two pivots. Now, Villa were very aggressive in their press and they put two of their central midfielders on the back of both Caicedo and Reece James. So this naturally allowed Chelsea to play around the sides. And this is where it was a little bit different, because now instead of isolating these wide players, there was actually lots of support given. So when the ball went into Nkunku here, we would actually get lots of bodies on the ball in order to try and force Villa to come across and press us. Ultimately leaving Gusto as a free man on the far side. Because then the left back, Maatsen, had to step in to press the zone that Palmer was in. And in the early stages of this match, this switch to Gusto was on all the time. Also, Enzo Fernandez would have a pretty free role in this game. He would have his starting position actually a lot wider towards the byline in order to utilise that passing lane between the Villa winger and the Villa centre mid. Of course, from there, when Chelsea had progressed the ball up the pitch, Enzo would step up, Gusto would almost play as that winger, overlapping Cole Palmer, and Neto was free to make those runs into any of the channels that he spotted in that Villa backline. And this ultimately led to the first goal. Now, this run out wide from Neto completely catches Villa off guard. And particularly for a team who like to anticipate the ball, who liked their centre-backs to jump up onto the ball and apply pressure. And as just previously mentioned, you can see Maatsen here stepping inside to be on Cole Palmer, and that opens up the space for Neto to exploit in that zone. This movement leaves the Villa centre-back stranded and quite confused actually, not knowing whether to step up or who to press. From here, I think it's actually very poor defending from Villa. They are 6v4 in this situation in favour of Aston Villa, but somehow none of the Chelsea players are properly marked. Mings here, to me, isn't serving any purpose. For me, he should be 5 yards further back, and so should that whole back line. They should all shift across. Because Nkunku is free at the back post. Then got Palmer as a free man near the edge. And then Enzo has positioned himself between the fullback and the centre-back. A solid start to the game this from Chelsea, but they couldn't kick on. Let's understand why. And it links to the way that Chelsea executed their press, and it grew more and more sloppy as the game went on. Now let me show you this, because Aston Villa created tons of their really good chances from Chelsea's initial press, and it wasn't good enough. It was mistake after mistake after mistake. But to understand this fully, let's start from the first half. So Aston Villa built up in the deep phase in sort of a 2-2, with the full-backs pushing higher and wider, and you had the two centre-backs and the two centre midfielders. And Chelsea's initial off-the-ball approach was pretty solid. It had Enzo Fernandez and Reece James pushing up extremely aggressively onto the double pivots. And then you had Neto and Nkunku, whose jobs here were key, as they would press the ball, but also curve their run to cut off that passing option into the fullback. So they were essentially doing two jobs: applying pressure to the ball whilst also shadow marking the fullbacks so the fullbacks could not receive. And this forced Villa to either go long or to play a risky ball through the centre. But this ultimately meant that Caicedo was often left a little bit stranded, because he had two Villa players here not picked up. You see, in this situation, he decides to push across to Morgan Rogers. Palmer was here, he was on this player, and that left a big gap, a big space in the middle for the ball to be played through. But this was not the main issue, because Chelsea actually dealt with this pretty well as the game went on. The main issues in the second half actually came from the first line of pressure. There was a clear pattern of errors, because this system only works if everyone does their job. Because in the second half, Chelsea got sloppy. And this was the first sign of this in the 62nd minute. Look at Neto here. He's wondering where's Reece James? Essentially here, he's doing Reece James's job. Reece James just step up. That means there's no pressure applied to the ball. And that was a warning sign for Chelsea, but they didn't fix it. And again, in the 70th minute, James now hasn't stepped up when Neto presses the ball, and Caicedo should then shift across. And again, in the 72nd minute, complete miscommunication here. This initial structure is good. However, after that, all three players press the ball, leaving an easy route to the centre-back, and Villa can play out easily. Then just moments later, still in the 72nd minute, look at how far Enzo Fernandez is away from his man that he should be on. That's an easy pass into the centre, into the spare man. Tielemans is able to turn and play it away, and Villa are on the attack. And again, the 73rd minute. Guys, these are highlights from just 5 minutes of the game. Good starting positions, but then for some reason, Reece James leaves his man. And again, another free player in the centre, free to receive and turn, and Villa get on another attack. This was a period of consecutive, sloppy, off-the-ball errors. That was a driving force to allow Villa to push on for their winner. And of course highlights how uncomfortable Reece James looks in the centre of the pitch. But the players knew their jobs, and we simply didn't carry out the plan for the entirety of the game. A very frustrating and disappointing defeat, because we had the game in the palm of our hands here. But let me know your thoughts on this game in the comments. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the page. Something has to change, and quick.